Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Happy New Year to everyone. First meeting of the new year of 2025. I can hardly believe quarter century already. The date is January the 13th, 2025. The time is 5 p.m. and I would call this meeting to um, I would like a mover in a second to approve the agenda as circulated. Councillor Locke and seconded by, did I see your Councillor Crockett? All in favor? That passes. Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest from the members of council? None? All right. I personally have no announcements to make. Does anyone from council have anything that they would like to announce to the public at this time? Nothing? Okay, then we'll move. First item on the agenda is public meeting regarding drainage, Court of Revision for the O'Reilly drain. And I believe we have Councillor Wayne Shipley coming in on Zoom from Middlesex Center as part of the court. Okay, there you are. Hello, Councillor Shipley.
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
All right, now, the Court of Revision will hear any appeals to the charges being assessed properties on the Elliott Branch A as outlined in the engineer's report. And then the next thing that we need to do is appoint 2 members in addition to Councillor Shipley as the Court of Revision for Thames Center. Those 2 members have agreed as Councillor Heeman and Deputy Mayor Smybert, and that Councillor Heeman will take on the duties as chair. So I'd like to ask for a that council adjourn its regular meeting at 5:02 p.m. in order to sit as the Court of Revision under the drainage. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Smybert and seconded by Councillor Heeman. Okay.
I'd like to call the Court of Revision for the O'Reilly drain to order. Can I confirm at this time that we have not received any appeals?
That is correct, Chair. There has no appeals been received.
Seeing as there's no appeals, can I ask any members of the court if they have any questions? Or are there any appeals in person? Okay, no appeals in person. Are there any questions from the court? Seeing none, I would ask this court deliberate on its decision. Do we have a decision? I can read the potential decision, which would be that the court, having met on behalf of the O'Reilly drain in 2024 with no appeals being submitted, adopt the drainage assessment schedule that has been submitted as part of the engineer's report dated October 16th, 2024 by Spreet and Associates. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor Smybert, seconder. Councillor Shipley. All in favor? So moved. Motion for adjournment. Deputy Mayor Smybert, seconded by Councillor Shipley. The Court of Revision is closed at 5:04 in order to reconvene in regular meeting of council.
Okay, thank you very much. That was quick, Travis? Thanks very much for your presence here this evening, Councillor Shipley.
No problem, Madam Mayor. All the best to all of you in 2025.
Thank you very much. And to you as well. Okay, now the next thing that we will do on item number 7 under the on your agenda, public meeting for planning, a mover and a seconder that council adjourns its regular meeting at 5:05 p.m. in order to convene in a public meeting under section 3412 of the Planning Act. A mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Heeman, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. All right, so this one is a zoning bylaw amendment application Z16-24. Lloyd Mayu as the applicant for 194 King Street, County Road 28 in the village of Thorndale. And an overview of the application by our planner, Alana Cortez, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So the purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment application is to rezone the subject property from the general commercial GC1 zone to a site-specific general commercial GC1-14 zone to allow multiple unit dwelling as a permitted use, in addition to all other uses permitted in the GC1 zone. So the subject property is situated on the north side of King Street, County Road 28, just west of Harrison Street in Thorndale, and the property contains a 234.12 square meter building and a detached garage. The building contains a vacant commercial unit on the first floor and a residential unit above the first floor. The lands are designated general commercial with a natural hazard overlay and are zoned general commercial 1. The current general commercial GC1 zone permits a variety of uses, including one dwelling unit accessory to a commercial use, subject to regulations. And these regulations include the accessory dwelling unit being located above the first floor and the gross floor area of the dwelling unit not exceeding 50% of the floor area of the main building. While a dwelling unit accessory to a commercial use is permitted subject to regulations, the applicant's request to utilize the entire building, both the first and second floor, for residential purposes is not permitted in the GC1 zone, and therefore a zoning bylaw amendment is required. So the building was used for both commercial and residential purposes in the past and was once entirely used for residential purposes up until 2009. The first floor of the building has since been converted and used as a commercial space, and the applicant has advised they are requesting this rezoning as it's been challenging to find commercial tenants, and therefore they want to ensure that the space is utilized. So staff have evaluated the subject application within the analysis section of the report. The provincial planning statement, County of Middlesex, and Thames Centre official plans permit a range of and mix of housing options within settlement areas, and the provincial planning statement indicates that planning authorities shall provide an appropriate range and mix of housing options by permitting and facilitating all types of residential intensification, including the development and redevelopment of underutilized commercial sites for residential use. The general commercial designation policies state that multi-unit residential developments are permitted within the general commercial designation, and considering the building contains an existing residential use, being an accessory dwelling unit, and the applicant is not proposing changes to the exterior or the footprint of the building at this time, staff is of the opinion that utilizing the entire building for residential purposes would be appropriate and would continue to be compatible with neighboring commercial uses. The Thames Centre official plan provides criteria to be used to evaluate zoning bylaw amendment applications, and staff is of the opinion that the criteria has been met or is capable of being met during the building permit process. Unacceptable adverse effects on surrounding uses are not anticipated, considering the exterior of the building would remain unchanged, with the proposed development consisting of internal renovations, and the subject lands contain sufficient parking. Additionally, staff believe that the residential use of the lands would likely have less traffic generated to the site in comparison to a commercial use. So based on the foregoing, the subject proposal is consistent with the provincial planning statement and conforms to the County of Middlesex and Thames Centre official plans. During the circulation of the public meeting notice, agency comments were received from the county engineer, the director of public works, the drainage superintendent, and the chief building official, as well as the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and these comments are included within the report. No public comments have been received to date. So staff recommend that application for zoning bylaw amendment Z16-24 be approved and that the implementing bylaw be introduced in the bylaw portion of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alana. Is there any additional information from the applicant? Is the applicant in the room or? Yes, any additional information you need to provide? No. And Sarah, just to confirm, do we have anyone online?
There's no one online, your worship.
Okay, and no one in the chambers who wishes to comment? Okay, so I will turn it over to council then if there are any questions. Okay, doesn't appear to be any questions. So at this, oh, I'm sorry, Tom, didn't see you. Go ahead.
Through your worship to the planner, this change to residential doesn't preclude future commercial use also though.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Heeman, that is correct. So all the GC1 zone permissions that are existing today would still remain.
Okay. And I agree, like it's been listed for quite a while and it's been difficult to get occupancy and we don't have a lot of commercial buildings in Thorndale, so that's why I just want to make sure that if at some point in the future it would still be available. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Heeman. Then if there are no other questions from the members of council, then I will then close the public meeting. Are you willing to move the decision? Okay, so recommendation for the motion to approve the zoning bylaw amendment application Z16-24 as appended to the agenda, and that the implementing bylaw be introduced in the bylaw portion of the agenda. May I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Smyber, all in favor? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, now moving on, a mover and a seconder to close the planning public meeting at the time of 5:12 p.m. and council convene its regular meeting in order to continue with its deliberations. Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Heeman. All in favor? That motion carries as well. All right. We're moving on to some delegations here. The first one, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, otherwise known as UTRCA. The 2025 UTRCA budget. Tracy Annette to present. Go ahead, Tracy, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you for having me here tonight. I'll draw your attention to the package and your agenda as item 8.1. It includes a number of information items, which are specific to the municipality as our municipal overview, a more general overview of the budget, our detailed budget package, and this presentation. So with that, I'll say next slide, please. I always like to remind our watershed municipalities that you are one of our municipalities that participate in a broader area that covers the Upper Thames River area. We were formed in partnerships with the province and our municipalities to ensure that we offer programs and services throughout our region. Our programs and services reflect our longstanding goal to bring as much value into our municipalities as possible and through our watershed approach. And through that value, it's through funding and leveraging those funding sources. We leverage the municipal investment by entering into partnerships in the work that we do to provide that return on investment. So we certainly try and strive to deliver as much programming through our programs and services that benefit the entire watershed as possible. Next slide. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about our programs and services, our general overview anyway, our 2025 draft budget considerations, our capital projects, some that are specific to the municipality here in Thames Centre, and some of our other programs and services that we offer that are pretty significant for 2025 and beyond. Next slide, please. Just a reminder about our programs and services. Through the changes in regulation over the last few years, we've had to categorize our programs into mandatory, non-mandatory, and other. Certainly those mandatory programs and services are where municipal levy can be used without any agreement. We have non-mandatory programs and services where the municipality may request a conservation authority to deliver a service on their behalf. An example you'll hear about the next delegation is the risk management services through our source protection plan. And then we have our other programs and services. While not required by municipalities, they certainly are advisable on a watershed basis. to provide a greater and broader environmental service. So with that, we do have an agreement with the Thames Center to provide those services. Next slide, please. Some examples of those mandatory Category 1 programs and services range from our planning and regulations, just heard in the last presentation. We're looking at those hazard areas and reviewing and commenting on Planning Act applications, but also providing permitting through our Conservation Authorities Act permitting program. And also enforcement when those permits are not obtained. We also provide water management, everything from our flood forecasting and warning program, our infrastructure and operations and maintenance of that infrastructure through our large dams. We provide mapping studies and information management to go along with that flood forecasting and warning and understanding where those natural hazards are on the landscape. We look at climate change risk and mitigation. Again, accompanying those water management, those changes that we've seen over time with high water levels and even the low water response that's covered in the next bullet point. With that, we always want to do as much natural hazards outreach and education as possible so people are aware of those hazard areas and those risks to people and property. We do land management activities as well. With Category 1, it has to be passive land management to fall under that category. And that's public access. Again, to allow for people to enjoy nature and have these natural areas in their municipalities or nearby. Through that, with our land management, a huge part of that is making sure that we're enhancing the natural heritage on those lands. Much of our lands, especially in Thames Center, are wetland like Dorchester Swamp. Other areas are floodplain, and we're making sure that people and property are kept safe by our land ownership. We also undertake our provincial water quality monitoring network for both surface and groundwater. We have our drinking water source protection program, not just for the Upper Thames, but for the Thames and Sydenham region. And then implementation of our watershed strategy, and as well those essential corporate costs that are required for running any business. Next slide, please. Through our 2025 draft budget, we really focused on those Category 1 programs and services that I just mentioned. We recognize that as we refine our budget process, those figures may change. We have some updated numbers based on taxation, based on contracts that have been estimated in the past. We may have more formal numbers moving forward. And those will continue to be refined over the coming months, even things like insurance costs. We just found out a few weeks ago what those might be for this coming year. We really tried to balance our budget for our Category 1 programs and services. There certainly results in some increases to the municipal share of our mandatory Category 1 programs and services. And this really is to address deficits that we've had in past years. We need a stable funding source for those Category 1 programs and services. And on average, that looks like about a 15% increase over all watershed municipalities. But that varies, again, depending on modified current value assessment and the amount of implementation of our capital programs too. Next slide, please. We did look at other funding alternatives. They're certainly limited when it comes to those mandatory programs and services. There's currently and remains a provincial freeze on planning and permitting activities related to commenting. We are no longer allowed for this year again to increase any of those fees collected in that regard. And right now we're only recouping about 33% of the costs for us delivering that program. There is some funding available through the province's water control infrastructure program, so water and erosion control, the WECI program, pardon me. But that amount has been maintained at a $5 million cap province-wide for the past 20 years. There's a lot of aging infrastructure out there, so we do worry that some of that funding will not be available for some projects. Happy to report that we have been eligible for some of the projects here in Thames Center to get some matching dollars for those capital costs. As well, we looked at the transfer agreement as well that the province has with CAs, that provincial municipal partnership. That has not increased in more than 20 years as well. And for the Upper Thames Conservation Authority, that amount remains at $181,213 annually. We do try to advocate for increases in funding of conservation authorities to the province, but that has not yet been successful. Next With our budget considerations, certainly there's those wage costs rise in relation to recent inflation and remaining competitive. We also have a larger workforce, it seems, at the younger age. So in addition to the cost of living adjustments, they are seeing step and merit increases. Whereas we've had an aging staff for a long time, so we weren't seeing as much increase in the same way. We certainly have to upgrade our GIS system into a new software. Our old software is no longer being maintained. We do have a new federal program for grant that's been available for phosphorus reduction. Although that's a Category 3 program, some of our overhead costs are covered through delivery of that program. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. But really, when we looked at our budget, this isn't any additional staffing beyond that federal grant requirement where those costs are covered by that grant program. Next slide. When we look at our operating funding sources for all of our programs, kind of show the distribution of where those funding sources come from our operating levy to our municipalities. Thames Center's portion is shown there, $273,000. With the over $8 million that are provided through the other watershed municipalities. Overall, we have in that pie, we've got a large chunk there, nearly a third, also through self-generated revenues too. And the remainder of the pie is through other grants and contracts that we have. And certainly many of those grants and contracts wouldn't be available if we didn't go out and apply for them. So next slide, please. With the municipal contributions, that's provided there as well. We tried to show the distribution between kind of our general levy amounts in the beige versus the benefit-based municipalities amounts. So when we're talking about that, sorry, can you hear me okay? Just wondering if I'm cutting out a bit. When we look at those two amounts, we do separate them to identify and highlight what is the portion from Thames Centre versus what we collect from our remaining watershed municipalities, and really showing that the general amount really balance out what those benefit-based amounts. And those are for those structures that a municipality receives more of the benefit of because it impacts their lands. In total there, that's provided in the chart and is also provided in that municipal handout that's in your package as well. So next slide, some of the capital projects we've listed. There's certainly additional capital work planned for 2025. Again, most of those capital works are to maintain the aging infrastructure and keeping them in a state of good repair. And there can be significant variances amongst those special benefiting municipalities. I've provided the chart in the top right hand there to really show the cost for a Dorchester CA dam, about $2,500. Dam or an operations plan is intended for 2025, and then some work on Dorchester Mill Pond, really tied to some safety railings and signage. Again, when we look at that, those are usually recommendations that have come out of dam safety reviews in the past. And just our ongoing operations and maintenance activities that flag those types of things that are in need of repair. And then Wildwood Dam, again, a small portion of all of the member municipalities contribute to that. And there's some additional monitoring equipment required there, as well as the safety boom installation. Again, that came out of our dam safety review recommendations for that. As I mentioned, we have applied and we have been successful in some alternative sources of funding for that. Without that funding, those costs would have been double. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight the cost apportioning agreements, or those Category 3 programs and services. We provide those stewardship and restoration activities through delivering landowner stewardship on the ground. There's been some, in 2023, there was the pier that was opened in 2023, but in 2024, we were very much involved in the grand opening and the signage for that location. We've undertaken a wetland enhancement, invasive species control projects in Thames Centre. We've had 3 different cover crop projects and over 11,000 trees planted within the municipality. We've also undertaken some watershed monitoring, some additional fish surveys and benthic surveys, and even found the black red horse, which is a threatened species in your water courses. So that's great news. And also through that, always partnering with communities and education in Thames Centre. Much is done with the work with the Mill Pond Committee and getting out to our schools. So Looking at total stewardship, the municipal contribution is just over $20,000, but through those projects, there's been over $77,000 worth of project work done in Thames Centre, and 63% of that has been funded through grants that we've managed to get. So great to see that investment being returned on. So next slide. A great program that we've applied for and been quite successful with is the Thames River Phosphorus Reduction Program. It started just at the end of 2024, but will continue through March of 2028. And a large part of that is flow through dollars to get out to our local agricultural community to undertake on the ground implementation of phosphorus reduction measures. With that, it also includes additional monitoring to see how well we're doing and through targeted sampling and targeted review. And then also that community outreach component and education. So really embracing the three components that I just talked about in the last slide. Through that, there is significant funding provided depending on the projects that are being discussed. And I've just kind of showed in the slide there in the white, those may be the priority areas, Reynolds Creek, which is in Thames Centre, but there are programs throughout the watershed. And the highlighted area in yellow is the Upper Medway. And I just mentioned that because some of our councillors here may be familiar with the work that we've done in the Upper Medway. It was really kind of the basis for which all the programming has now evolved to include in throughout the watershed. So a great program, and I encourage all your rural landowners to apply. Contact information is provided there for Tatiana. So next slide. When we look at the phosphorus reduction, again, we look at that broader watershed approach. And the pie chart there shows that significant amounts, all within the blue areas, depending on which section of the Thames, whether it be the main Thames, the North Thames, or the South branch of the Thames, all contribute to phosphorus. There is amounts that are through wastewater treatment, but when you're talking about such a large area in the watershed with small amounts of runoff over such a broad area, those are what contribute to those downstream impacts. Chatham-Kent, I'd like to say that that water is not quite the green shade it is, but no, the photo has not been edited. That's the type of impacts that they see downstream. So we're all doing our part to provide those phosphorus reduction programs to enhance water quality, ultimately to Lake Erie. So slide. Again, if you have any questions, happy to answer them, but just a reminder, the budget schedule is provided on the right-hand side of the screen there. We start back in March looking at our work plans, get some board direction in June and August. Again, we have a preliminary budget to our board with the draft budget presented in October. Through November through February, I get out to councils to present the budget and ask for any feedback that you have. And then in January, we review those comments at the end of the month, and then with consideration at our February AGM. So certainly here to answer any questions. I know Councillor Heeman's provided some comments in the past, has been involved in those discussions at the board table as well. So happy to answer anything you have.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Are there any questions from the members of council for Tracy tonight? Councillor Crockett, go ahead.
Sorry, we got new mics. Thank you for your presentation and for coming out this morning. I know that the impact of the Upper Thames levy was a topic of discussion during our budget deliberations. I have just two questions for you. One, you had mentioned the need to upgrade a GIS system. Do you partner with any of the municipalities and utilize their GIS systems, kind of like in a partnership relation, if they have it, because I know not everyone has. And then will your systems be compatible with those that are being utilized by your partners?
Yes, through your worship to the councillor. Great question. With conservation authorities, we do have an umbrella on organization called Conservation Ontario. And so we've been working through Conservation Ontario to make sure that we're all using the same system and able to leverage that investment with support and everything else. So that's kind of been our main driver on which systems being proposed. But certainly with any GIS system and the layers that are being created for use on the day-to-day, I think it's hazard layers, any information that we have related to natural heritage, our water courses, all of those can be exported and then imported into our municipal systems, regardless of what they're using.
Great, thanks for that insight. And then just my second question, you had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that some of the increase in the levy this year was due to kind of year-over-year deficiencies. And you alluded to kind of matching future budget planning to kind of mitigate that. So I was just wondering if you could kind of fill us in on what proactive actions you're going to be taking for 2026 to kind of alleviate that going forward.
Yes. Through the mayor again, thank you for the question. Certainly that's been our goal, is to make sure that we have more sustainable funding sources and to bring us up. This has been the first, 2024, I should say, has been the first year of truly implementing our budget within the new framework. So now we have a better scope of what to expect moving forward. So again, some of the programs that we're undertaking for planning and regulations, for example, we're doing a service review to recognize what's needed to sustain that. That's happening in the first quarter. I think that will, and again, look for efficiencies. I think that's our goal. So certainly we recognize that. We've been through a process of updating our asset management plan for all of our flood and erosion control infrastructure. We now have our watershed strategy completed. We have our land strategy. So with our land strategy, part of that was a lands inventory and also identifying those goals for what lands we should have in our portfolio of lands, and also policies for acquisition and disposition. And that's on our agenda to look at. Are there any properties that may not meet our goals any longer and can be disposed of? With that, those funds are intended to go into a reserve pot and used for other land management activities. So those are some of the strategies that we've got in place and looking forward to try to mitigate those expenses. But the main goal was to reduce our reliance on our reserves in the past, and again, look at some continuity of service too.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Cockett. Anyone else? Councillor Lucky.
Yeah, through your worship. Really, really nice presentation. I enjoyed reading through that. It's very well done. So just a couple questions regarding like salaries and headcounts. I was just a little bit confused about your comment about the younger demographic getting higher merit increases. Yeah, could you maybe expand a little bit to my understanding?
Sure, through the mayor to the councillor as well. Yeah, just that most of our older staff had been at job rate for a long time, whereas when we look at our year-to-year staffing complement, now we're seeing some of those increases not only being cost of living, but also a merit increase. So year over year, we are going to see some change because we don't always estimate that everyone's going to be at job rate. So I guess that's where I'm kind of coming from. So we are seeing a little bit difference year over year and don't expect the status quo when it comes to staffing that way. But headcounts, we are certainly expecting some maintenance of those headcounts.
So what would be your I guess the average percentage increase?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I think it's around 4% off the top of my head. Again, it changes with our grading system.
Yeah.
And we are looking at updating our grading system. That piece has not been done for quite some time. We have been doing compensation reviews a couple years ago, but it's how we evaluate each job, our job evaluation system, we call it. So that may change a little bit, but again, that's an estimate, knowing that there is a couple of retirements on the horizon, and there'll be some newer staff coming into those positions, but depending on what type of experience they have will depend on where they land on our job rates.
Okay. Yeah. And then just the other question. So I noticed that for like your wages budget, it looks like about a third of it would be considered as corporate essential. So what sort of roles would you have as like in your admin department? Like in terms of like head count, how big is your finance department versus, your marketing department? And
Yeah, and I would say that through your worship, the amount for admin is probably a little bit broader than just administration proper. Certainly, we have a couple of administrative secretaries, one clerk specific for our council and one general administration. We have 3 HR staff. We do hire a significant amount for our parks, as you can imagine, each summer, and the health and safety that goes along with that is a position. And then our finance staff, again, with operating the parks. We have a lot of flow through costs. But again, when we look at our administration, we have a system where we allocate out those costs depending on what program it's serving. So when we do support those parks, the parks is actually supporting back that administrative overhead too. So although it might seem like a lot is covered by our park system, which they are self-funded. So it really works to support everyone. We also have our fleet, our asset management, all those types of administrative costs are included in our budgeting process too. Through your worship, yes, we have that too. Sorry, forgot that oversight. We have marketing and communications that also make sure our website's up to date. Much like municipalities, all of our board of directors meetings are posted, as well as any events and everything else that you could imagine is available on our website. So I would encourage you to check it out. Well, through your worship, we do have some who are specifically funded through a program. So again, that program that I just mentioned under the phosphorus reduction program, one of those positions funded entirely through that grant to make sure that our landowners are aware of everything that we're doing to get grant funding out to our watershed residents, and also keeping information and materials on our website for that. We have one graphic artist and then 3 who are 3 other staff that are involved with a number of marketing and communications activities. Again, much of their funding goes back to different program areas that they're supporting. So again, that allocation system allows us not to rely entirely on the municipal levy for supporting those costs. Those are distributed depending on which programs are using their services. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone else on council? Councillor Heeman.
Through your worship, not so much a question, just more of a comment that being on the board, I start to look at the municipality a little differently, and I think we got a little snapshot of a lot of the activities that Upper Thames does in the community, and having experienced some pretty significant torrential rains this past year, you start to appreciate some of the infrastructure, both in drainage and in our water courses that help keep everything working the way it does. I know one of the things that we've talked about in council here before and with the Upper Thames is the importance of advocating for removal of the development fee freeze. I think we're all familiar with what that did to our budget, and that is definitely affecting conservation authorities. And when we say development pays for development, right now it's not in this particular instance. And I think that's one of the drivers that we're seeing with respect to the levy. And I want to thank Tracy and the Upper Thames for their help with our tree planting initiative. And I know we planted quite a few trees this year, and you guys were definitely significant partners in making that happen. So thank you for helping us with our Category 3 goals. And again, the Mill Pond it's the heart of this community, and it's well trafficked and it's well utilized. And I think the community will be very pleased to see those enhancements, because we love being in the environment, but we also impact the environment when we do so. And to see that being invested in and refreshed will be good for everybody. So the last thing I wanted to comment on is that we also are looking at a communication effort for the updated flood mapping, which I think will be helpful for not only our planning staff, but also for residents when they're looking at figuring out flood boundaries for proposed developments. So that's something that I think the GIS and the communications activities will support. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Heeman. Any other comments, questions? I have one. When you talk about phosphorus reductions, it's nothing to do particularly with the budget, but what's the, like Cole's notes version of what do you do to try and remediate that situation?
Yes, great question, Your Worship. There's many different activities that can be utilized, but often it's tied to site-specific details. Again, what the soil conditions are. So what might be beneficial in one area might not work as well as in others. So part of that grant program is actually some of the research that we're doing right on the demonstration farm here in just outside of Thorndale too. But things like cover crops, keeping the farmland covered over the winter months to make sure that soil isn't running off into our waterways. Sometimes it's best management practices about rotational tillage. A number of different initiatives. We've even been experimenting with some of the tile drainage and holding back water in the drainage activities. Again, that's one of the demonstration things. So again, it's having the staff with the right technical expertise to go out to the farm and offer some of the advice based on your specific conditions and what your crop rotation, things like that entail. And
Good.
even things like buffers, planting and vegetating around waterways, whether they be trees or natural vegetation, all of those things help to reduce that runoff that contains phosphorus.
Thanks. And is that one of the issues with the Dorchester Mill Pond water that gets so scuzzy? The scuzzy's probably not, but for lack of a word at the moment. Is that an issue of phosphorus as well?
I'm not certain, Your Worship. It could be a number of factors, but I can certainly ask our technical staff to look into any past water quality records that they have for the area and determine what are the causes of the water contamination. And sometimes it's a visual thing. I know sometimes pond duckweed and some of the vegetation is viewed as being a poor water quality, but it may not be. But those are the things that we continue to monitor and report back on a sub-watershed basis. So that we have a good understanding of water quality and different actions that can happen on the ground to help improve that.
Okay, thank you. And just one other thing is, because we're all in the situation where we're petitioning governments for more money and that sort of thing. I noticed there that your Conservation Authorities Act transfer payment, which had not increased in more than 20 years, was cut in half to 181,213 in 2019. So that's status quo going forward as far as you know. Do the conservation authorities get together and try to petition the government?
Yes, thank you for the question, Your Worship. That's something that conservation authorities and through our umbrella organization, Conservation Ontario, have been advocating for. Again, additional transfer payment funds, but also even the WECI program, for example, that $5 million cap when many of our structures were built in the 50s and 60s. Many of the other CAs across the Ontario, across the province, built structures after Hurricane Hazel, 55. So more and more, the age of the infrastructure just requires more of that longer term maintenance. And that pot of money doesn't go a whole lot. So it is identified through a priority ranking process. So we worry that there might not be enough funding. And again, it relies on the municipalities contributing as well, half that amount. There's been some improvements to the program to at least allow the span of the dollars to go beyond a 1-year allotment, so it can be expanded over a 2-year period. But it's still difficult for municipalities to find funding to support the very important infrastructure. So that's something where the additional advocacy work from all of our partners would be beneficial.
Appreciate the answer. Oops, a few more questions now. Maybe I opened a Pandora's box here. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Your first comment question just sparked something that I was going to ask and then I decided not to. So now I'm going to ask it again, or now I've decided to ask it. Does Upper Thames or Conservation Ontario, do they partner with other like organizations? Like for the phosphorus program, I assume like Ontario Soil and Crop could be utilized as a subject matter expert in that. So I was just wondering what your partnerships were kind of beyond municipalities in your area.
Through your worship, that's a great question, Councillor Crockett. Yes, we do have many partners, Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, OFA, even some of the wheat producers, so many different, as well as academia. Much of our research as well, we've been in partnership with University of Guelph in the past, as well as University of Waterloo, again, to understand phosphorus movement on the land and to target some of those areas based on soil type and things like that. So I joke sometimes we partner with anyone we can make eye contact with because that is certainly a big part of our business, as well as partnering with our other conservation authorities that are running similar programs that even on our website, for example, making sure that we're all sharing the same information and are getting word out the same way.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Lockie had questions.
Yeah, through your worship. This is also a kind of similar question regarding partnerships. Do you ever try to work with like corporations outside of government on projects and to get, I guess, get them to sponsor projects?
Yes, again, through your worship to Councillor Lockie. Yeah, we've had some success with corporations as well. Again, when we talk about a lot of our community events, a lot of that is partnered with start.ca was one example recently, but corporations as well. So yeah, when we go to the water festival, the Children's Water Festival, for example, it'll be up in Perth County this year, but that's something where we always bring a large number of partners, corporate and otherwise, to those types of events, either through participation and having event space and helping to volunteer at the event to funding to help support those. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions, then I'd ask that a mover and a seconder that the presentation by Tracy Annette from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority regarding the 2025 UTRCA budget be received for information. Deputy Mayor Smyber and Councillor Heeman, all in favor? That motion carries. Thanks very much. Okay, the next item that we have is these Thames, Sydenham and Region Drinking Water Source Protection Plan Amendment. Julie Welker, Source Protection Coordinator from the Thames, Sydenham and Region Drinking Water Source Protection. Okay, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having me this evening. I really appreciate being here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation over Zoom. So thank you. I know it's not always as great as in person, but I do appreciate it. Am I providing the presentation, or is it being shared on your end?
I can provide it if needed.
Sure. Hey, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so this evening I'm here to speak to the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Plan amendments. So next slide, please. So you may recall back in 2000, the events that unfolded in Walkerton where the community's drinking water became contaminated. 7 people lost their lives and thousands of people became ill, and a lot of people still have health issues today as a result of that event. So at the time, the government wanted to dive in and did an assessment of what happened. And through that, they decided they wanted a multi-barrier approach when it comes to our drinking water. So they developed the Clean Water Act. And this act is really to protect existing and future sources of drinking water from contamination or depletion. As a result of this act, the Drinking Water Source Protection Program was created. And this program is really about a multi-stakeholder, collaborative, locally driven, which is important, process to make sure we're protecting municipal drinking water systems. And I just want to highlight that we're really focusing on municipal drinking water systems, not private systems in this under the Clean Water Act. Next slide, please. So when they were looking at the program, they were trying to figure out how do we kind of roll it out. So they broke up the province, the whole province of Ontario, into regions. And it was based on the watershed boundaries. So Upper Thames was one, St. Clair and Lower Thames watershed boundaries was consolidated, and we make up together the Thames-Sydenham Source Protection Region. So anytime we're talking about the region, it's going right from Sarnia, Stratford, Woodstock, Chatham, Kent, and everything in between. Next slide, please. So when they developed the program, they knew they had to develop the technical rules, like what is the guidance to this program? So the technical rules are really about delineating these vulnerable areas around our municipal drinking water systems, determining what is the vulnerability to these systems from contaminants, and identify any of those threat activities that could harm our drinking water. And the province has identified 22 prescribed threat activities, and they want to assess the risk levels. So when we're looking at the map to the right, or my right, that is a delineation. So we call that a wellhead protection area. And that green dot in the middle, that would be your well. The red circle around it, that's always static. So that doesn't change. It doesn't matter what municipal well we're looking at. It's always a 100-meter zone around that well. That well within that 100-meter zone is always the most vulnerable to contamination for our drinking water. So we have stronger policies that would apply within that zone. Then we move out, and it's all based on time of travel. So we are looking at the hydrogeology here. What is happening underground? What's the aquifer doing? What's the overburden doing? And that's how this is all mapped out. So you'll have your wellhead protection area A, which is the 100-meter. Then you have your wellhead protection B, which is your 2-year time of travel. So if you have a spill, like a fuel spill, for instance, it could take 2 years to get to the drinking water. And then a wellhead protection area C, which is 5-year time of travel, and your wellhead protection area D, which is your 25-year. Then within that, all the science is happening, and the vulnerability scores are attached to it. So, but mostly within a wellhead protection area A, you always have a vulnerability score of a 10. That is the absolute highest. And then you can go down from there. 8 is pretty high, 2 is pretty significant. So we do have extra policies for that. But I'll talk about that just in a few slides. So next slide, please. So for Thames Center specifically, you have 2 communities that are on municipal drinking water, as you know. You have Thorndale and we have Dorchester. So if we're looking at these maps, you can see quite a difference. So the Thorndale has a very low vulnerability to the drinking water. But when we look at Dorchester, there's a lot of red there. So that is that's a vulnerability score of a 10. So a lot more policies will apply within that area to ensure that we are protecting that drinking water. And of course, as you are probably well aware, Dorchester, it's a swamp. And we have what's called a groundwater under direct influence happening here with the creek going through. So it is one of the more vulnerable systems in our whole region. St. Mary's is also one of our more vulnerable regions. Next slide, please. So what are our guiding documents? So we have the Source Protection Plan. This plan was developed through guidance from the province under the Clean Water Act, but because it's locally driven, it's really developed through the Source Protection Committee. And this committee is made up of all the municipalities, industry, First Nations, the public, and health unit sits at or attends every meeting, and we have a representative from our board, as well as Ministry of Environment and Conservation Parks. So this plan lays out all the policies that we have that relate back to those 22 threats to our drinking water. In our policies, we have different tools. So we have prohibition, We have management and education outreach, as those are our primary tools that we use with our policies. Now, when we're talking about our assessment reports, that's kind of where all the science is housed. So we're looking at, like, we're drilling down, no pun intended, but we're drilling down, looking at like their water budgets, our vulnerable areas and threats of each system that we have in our region. Next slide, please. So amendments have to happen time to time to these reports. It's not an easy process, and it's not one where we can just go and make changes as we see fit. There's quite a lengthy process that needs to happen under the Clean Water Act. It's quite prescribed. But we can make amendments when, let's say, there's a new well that's going to come online, or there's a change to an existing system, or there's been updates to the technical rules. And this is primarily why I'm here today, is really talk about those technical rule changes. Next slide, please. So on December 3rd, 2021, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks released an update to their rules under the Clean Water Act. As a result, we had our staff do a comprehensive review of all of our policies, looking at them. Do they still make sense? What's missing? What gaps need to be filled? And through that process, we really have found that 3/4 of our policies really needed to be changed. Some were very minor, just editorial changes, some kind of a reword within the body of the text, some new policies. So and a lot of these, a lot of the main threats that were changed, or the circumstances to these threats, had to do with fuel, snow, waste, sewage, which includes stormwater, salt, commercial fertilizers, DNAPLs, which is more of like chemicals and degreasers that you'd find in like mom and pop garage, like auto body shops and stuff, and pesticides. Next slide, please. Okay, so the impacts to Thames Center, it's pretty minimal for the existing threats on the landscape. So one of the big ones across the region was to fuel. So originally fuel, 2,500 liters of fuel was considered a threat to our drinking water. So if you had a tank that had that much or more, it had to be mitigated through management of some sort. But now the government has changed that to 250 liters of fuel. So you can imagine a lot of farmers would have a 250-liter tank on their property. So that is something that will need to be addressed once the draft policies have all been approved. Application of road salt. The Source Protection Committee decided to go with an education outreach approach tool with this one, just because it's so broad, it's so vast, and municipalities are already doing a lot of work. And the other one was commercial fertilizers. So through this whole process, we realized there was a gap with our commercial fertilizer policies. It wasn't quite aligning with the Nutrient Management Act policies. So we've done a rewrite on them, and that could affect property in Dorchester specifically within the WAPA A. So now it's going to be prohibition for any commercial fertilizer use within that 100-meter zone. But there will be possible impacts to future activities on the landscape based on those circumstances earlier. So like if you have a new development being built, storage of snow can now be a threat if it meets certain circumstances. So those things need to be looked at. Stormwater, that has changed. The threat for stormwater has changed, certain circumstances around that. So these are things, Thames Center, as Tracy had spoke to earlier, Thames Center has delegated the risk management services to our office, and we do have staff that will work. She works day in and day out, and she'll be looking at all of these threats. And she has done a kind of a cursory desktop review on the impact to Thames Center specifically. And for the existing threats, there's only a few properties that could be affected. But once policies are approved, she'll hit the road running and start working and negotiating with those landowners. But a lot of those landowners already have risk management plans in place. So it's going to come down to just modifying those or amending those agreements. Next slide, please. So the amendment process, we had to go through, so we developed the draft policies based on our review of the changes to the threats or to the technical rules. We submitted our draft package to the ministry just for early comment. They provided their comments. We've gone back and forth, and this, of course, goes to Source Protection Committee. Currently now we are in pre-consultation with implementers. So yourselves, municipalities are implementers and other ministries. And as part of under the Clean Water Act, it specifically states that we need council resolution from all councils, all municipalities that could be affected by any amendments to the source protection plan and assessment reports. Once we've gone through that process, it will go to public consultation. So that's where landowners and businesses will be invited to come to a webinar, call us up. We'll have a process on what that public consultation will look like. But that will be their opportunity to talk to us directly and understand what this could mean and let us know if there's any concerns or changes that we should be considering. Once we've addressed those comments, it will go, final submission will go back to the MECP. They do get the final say, and once they've given the final approval, it's considered approved, and the risk management officials will hit the road running, as I said earlier, and make sure that they're continuing to safeguard the community's water. And I believe the last slide was just my information. Yes, there we go. So any questions?
Thanks very much, Julie. So I'll turn it over to council for any questions that they might have. Any questions? Councillor Crockett, go ahead.
1 second. I was trying to look for something, so I have to pull it up. I guess I'll start by kind of stating a comment in the fact that this council certainly, and the last one previously, has had lots of discussion around specifically, I think, the Dorchester drinking water protection zone, considering we have quite a significant subdivision that's planned for that area that just recently started moving dirt. So with that being said, and these changes, I was just wondering what the impact would be on that subdivision and the kind of subsequent drainage works in that area, kind of at the corner of Dorchester Road and Byron Ave. It might be a preliminary question, but just curious if you, Julie, or if any Thames Center staff have comment on that.
Sure, I can jump in from my perspective through you, Worship, to the council. That, yes, we have flagged, we've read the report, the original report, and there are some areas that were flagged that don't align with the new rules under the stormwater. So we have flagged it. I have a meeting tomorrow with your staff. We're going to discuss it further. I think the suggestion will be that staff ask for the consultant to resubmit the plan, like evaluate the original plan based on the new rules and identify if it meets any of those threats, the circumstances for those threats. Then from there, we'll try to address it because we do have prohibition policy under the source protection plan for stormwater within a wellhead protection area 10. That includes A and B. But again, we have that policy, but that policy, you have the text, but then you got to refer it back to the circumstances under the technical rules. And if now it meets those technical rules, it could be prohibited. There is discussion on whether you can get whether the source, if you could take this to the Source Protection Committee and they can modify that policy. That's yet to be determined. We don't know about that direction yet. But that is something that has been flagged, and I'm glad you asked that question.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. My second one is regarding the changes that you mentioned tonight, specifically fuel and road salt, assumably would kind of be the most impactful in those areas. I was just wondering what, if any kind of preliminary discussions have been taking place, whether this can be reduced through like education or resources, or if there's going to have to be some like big changes take place to adapt to those.
Thank you. Through worship to council. Yeah, so for application of SALT, we're gonna do a comprehensive education outreach program. We're actually bringing on 4 University of Western Ontario students. They're going to help us develop like a campaign program around it. So your risk management official, she's going to be, once it's all approved and ready, she's going to hit the road running and trying to educate the community on reducing their salt. We understand there's that liability, that balance between liability and human health and ecosystem health. So that will go through education outreach. The fuel, the draft policy is actually, we don't even have a draft policy for that, but the current policy states management. The circumstances just changed, so we didn't need to change the body of the text of that policy because we didn't have quantity within the text of it. But that will be management. What that looks like, yet to be determined. It could be something like making sure your tanks are encapsulated in concrete barrier so that if it ever spills, it's captured in that and it's addressed before it seeps into the ground.
Thank you, Julie. Did you have another question?
I do. I was
Otherwise,
going to say, I think Jared has follow-up
I was going to
response.
mention that. Okay.
Excuse me, thank you very much. I report 2 things as far as on the municipalities end of things. Fuel storage. Obviously, there's an on-site generator at the water treatment plant. We have a tank that's larger than 250 liters. That's double-lined, inspected actually every 10 years, well, annually rather. And then those reports are handed to the ministry every 10 years. As far as salt, the salt application, we have a salt management plan, and our trucks are all dialed in to be as efficient as we can, especially, and all of our drivers know about the wellhead protection area, and just to be very conservative in those areas. That's on the municipality's end of things.
Thanks, Director Craven. Did you have anything else then?
I have one
Shanta?
random question
Great.
that's more just taking advantage of Julie being here.
Go for it.
So, as we can see from the map, is that our drinking water protection areas obviously kind of coincide with our urban settlement areas. We've been having conversations of potentially moving, or I guess developing residential properties in a larger quantity kind of north of the Thames River. So I was just wondering if you could very quickly kind of explain how the wells, if a new well is needed north of the river, how that would work on a drinking water protection area, I guess, because they're all kind of quite far apart from one another. If that were to happen.
Absolutely. Through worship to council. Yeah, so if the municipality wants to bring a new well online, so say it's in North Dorchester, there is a very prescribed process that needs to take place to ensure its safety. So what would happen is, the municipality could hire a consultant or do it in-house, however you do it, but identify through an EA where the need for the well and where the location would best be put in the ground. From there, there is a multitude of steps that need to happen. So the municipality will have to hire a consultant to delineate the wellhead protection area through a science report. And they have to identify all the threats that could be identified associated with that wellhead protection area. That will come to our office. We have to review it through our hydrogeologist, go back and forth, provide comments. If once we're satisfied, there's notifications that will go back and forth so that the municipality can apply for a permit to take water. But then we have to go through the similar process that we're going through today with the amendment, through pre-consultation, council resolution, public consultation, and final approval. A municipality cannot provide water to their community without well until it's been approved by the ministry and it's in the source protection plan and the assessment report.
Thank you. I appreciate that insight.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Heeman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'd just like to dive a little bit deeper into the fertilizer question because there are as you mentioned, quite a few parcels in the Dorchester wellhead protection area, and then there's two different properties. Although it is a much smaller catchment area in Thorndale at the well, I'm just wondering how you're planning to roll that out because fertilizer is a big part of making an agriculture operation profitable, and you can't if you're not using synthetic fertilizer, you're using manure, and you can't use manure in these instances as well. And then, that might be a tough conversation. So if you could give me a little more confidence, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Through your worship to council. Okay, so the one thing we did look at, and we were thinking, this didn't start through Dorchester, this was another region where we found the gap. But we did decide, there was a lot of discussion on should we do prohibition on commercial fertilizer in a 10 in general. But knowing that Dorchester has a very large WAPA B, we call it WAPA, Wellhead Protection Area B, that's in a 10, we knew that would be unfair to ask, and that could really be harmful to a business, a farming business. So the Source Protection Committee agreed to keep that as management. Now for the WAPA A, the the 100-meter zone right around the well, prohibition, it's consistent with across the province. Everyone has prohibition within that wellhead protection area because it's so vulnerable. So the process that kind of unfolds is the risk management official will work with the landowners on this. And usually if it's a management thing, there's a negotiation going back and forth on what can happen and what they can and cannot do. So it's really about relationship building. But when it does come to prohibition, it's really the message is this is the community's drinking water. We cannot have another Walkerton happen again. And these have been scientifically identified as threats to our drinking water. So prohibition is the best route to go to ensure that that doesn't happen. And more often than not, there's consensus with landowners. They do understand that and they do want to take responsibility. Sometimes, yes, we can maybe butt heads, if you will, on this, but some municipalities will decide to buy out that land and just keep it in fallow so that it just stays in grass or whatever, so that there's no net loss. But that's a very rare occasion does that happen because most landowners, in all honesty, are okay with that. They understand that 100-meter zone. It has to be protected at all costs.
Go ahead, Councillor Heeman.
Sorry, I'm just wondering within that negotiation, is there some materials that would be permitted, or because again, there's various risk profiles for various materials. Is that something that is subject to that negotiation with the landowner, or is it just any application is prohibited?
Is this referring to commercial fertilizer in general?
Yes.
So the province, there used to be a list. It was the same with pesticides. I used to have a list, a prescribed list that risk management officials can go and check back with, like, okay, do you have these? Are you using any of these products? Those lists have been removed and it's kind of at the discretion of the risk management official. So we do know it's not just nitrogen, it's more than just nitrogen that could be rolled into the commercial fertilizer, but it does come down to the discretion of the risk management official. How they do that, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I can certainly get back to you. But it does give a little bit of leeway towards the landowner if need be.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Heeman. Thank you, Julie. Are there any other questions before we move on? No? Okay then. Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, Julie,
You're
and
welcome.
the answers to your questions. Oh, Jared, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Heeman, it may be beneficial to know that you may recall there, probably about 4 years ago, we purchased a large section of the WAPA A in Thorndale. There's just a sliver there that is actually currently agriculture. I don't believe there's any agricultural WAPA A's in Dorchester. Everything will be developed now. So just rest assured, the WAPA A is a small portion is just ag right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Craven. Is that it then? Any other questions from council or are we good? Okay, at this moment then, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that the presentation and report by Julie Welker from the Thames Sydenham and Region Drinking Water Source Protection regarding the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Plan Amendment be received for information. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Lockie, all in favor? Thank you. That carries. And then at this moment, I'd like to ask your consensus to move on to item 11.1 under reports of departments, proposed updates to the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Plan and assessment reports. Everyone in agreement? All right, then. Then I will call upon our interim director, Amanda Story, to present.
Thank you through you, your worship, and thank you for Julie to present today. The recommendation of this report is to be received for information, and that pursuant to section 34(3) of the Clean Water Act 2006, the Council of the Municipality of Thames Centre to endorse the proposed updates to the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Plan. The purpose of this report is the TSR is undertaking amendments to the Source Water Protection Plan, Volume 3, to include draft new and revised source protection plan policies because of the updated technical rules, as Julie presented today. Under Section 34(3) of the Clean Water Act 2006, a municipal council resolution endorsing the proposed updates to the Source Water Protection Plan is required from affected municipalities prior to public consultation. A required 35-day public consultation period will commence once municipal endorsement is received. And if you're looking for more information, the link to the sourcewaterprotection.on.ca is in the report as well, which includes revised maps for the affected areas. And the property owners that may be impacted by the amendments will be sent a notice of the consultation as well. Following the public consultation period, the TSR Source Protection Region will submit the proposed updates to the Source Protection Plan to the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, the MECP, for their approval. There's a bit of background, which Julie touched on and presented today. And to ensure these reports stay current, amendments from time to time are necessary and are made when there are changes to the current system, a new system is put in place, or the technical rules have changed, which is the current position the TSR is in right now, which is the point of the consultation. The changes to the technical rules include changes to threat circumstances that could impact existing and future activities on the landscape. These changes are primarily related to fuel, snow, waste, sewage, including stormwater, salt, commercial fertilizers, DNAPLs, and pesticides, which Julie touched on today as well. So the comments, the 250 liters from 2,500 liters was a major change there, which speaks to the fuel now being a threat, the application of road salt, and the commercial fertilizers, as previously mentioned. So the summary is that including the LAWSS secondary intake into the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Assessment Report, including updated mapping, compliance with mandatory amendments made to the technical rules 2021 and tables of drinking water threats, and draft new and amended policies. There are no financial implications, and looking to speak back to the recommendation.
Thank you, Amanda. Are there any questions from council? Okay. Mover and seconder then that report number PDS -002-25 be received for information. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Heeman, all in favor? Thank you. That motion carries. And that pursuant to section 34(3) of the Clean Water Act, the Council of the Municipality of Thames Centre endorsed the proposed updates to the Thames Sydenham Source Protection Plan. I'm sorry, I should have included that in when we did our as a vote, but are we taking that is included? All good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Due to another commitment, one of the presenters in the room has to leave to a meeting. So I'm looking for council's consensus to go into closed earlier than is noted on your agenda. General consensus from council? Okay, then. In that case, yeah, go ahead, please.
Resolved that the council adjourn to closed session at 6:22 PM pursuant to sections 329 or section 239(2) F and K of the Municipal Act for council to consider three items. One, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And B, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And C, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality.
And Deputy Mayor Smybert, all in favor? Okay. All right, then we will end the recording and it will commence again after closed session. I wish to advise that in closed session, council received advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Council provided direction to staff regarding an item that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And council provided direction to staff regarding a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality. So at this point, council, we will pick up where we left off with item number 9, the adoption of the minutes of December 9th, 2024, a special meeting, excuse me, concerning the budget, and December 9th, 2024, regular meetings. May I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Crockett, all in favor? Thank you. That carries. The items on the consent agenda on item number 10, items listed under the consent agenda are received for information in one motion. Council members may request that one or more items be separated for further action. Is there anything that council would like to pull at this point? I'm going to ask that 10.2 and 10.3 be pulled and with a direction to the clerk to uh, come up with correspondence to circulate on those two items in favor of that council supports. Is there any discussion? Tom? Pardon? 10.3, so it's 10.2 and 10.3. Yes. Exactly. Okay. Any other discussion? All right.
So the mover, sorry, the resolution will be that consent items 10.1 and 10.4 be received for information, and that resolution 10.2 and 10.3 are supported.
We're moving on to reports of departments. 11.2, proposed Dale Lions Community Center ad hoc terms of reference, and we're looking to the clerk to present.
So this is a result of the notice of motion from the November 18th, 2024 council meeting. I have developed a draft terms of reference, which follows similarly to other terms of references that we use. It does include hopefully getting two residents with preferential treatment to be residents of Thorndale. However, we can't specifically state that. One member of the Thorndale and District Lions Club, one member of the Thorndale Agricultural Society, and two members of council. This being two of the larger user groups, both having equal representation on it. And then two members of council. Otherwise, their purpose is laid out as per the resolution, and that the idea will be to develop a shovel-ready project. Is there any other questions?
Deputy Mayor Smyber?
Great, thanks. No questions. I'm prepared to move the recommendation with the two members of council being Mayor McMillan and Councillor Heeman.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Crockett? All in favor? Okay. That carries. Thank you very much, Council. Further to that is also, in the staff be requested to advertise seeking committee appointments in local newspaper, website, and social media as necessary, noting that groups identified within this report will also be notified, and that staff be requested to report back to council concerning the outcome of advertising seeking new appointments, noting that a bylaw consolidating all appointments once known will be prepared for council approval. All right, so that motion carried. The next one is the annual Freedom of Information request. And again, I will look to the clerk for that presentation.
Good evening. This is information just for you guys to receive. It is information on our FOIs, or Freedom of Information requests, under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Annually, we report to the province statistics, and we just wanted to highlight some information for you all. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
I think we've all had a chance to read that. Are you making the motion, or do you have a question?
Comment?
Oh, comment? Go ahead.
I just want to thank staff for the information. I do acknowledge and understand that The number of requests are increasing year to year, and they're getting a bit more complicated as well. So I am hoping, I've got my fingers crossed that the AMCTO report and the advocacy work that they're doing in order to make some changes to that, I would say, outdated legislation. I hope that that does get approved for your sake, Jana. And I move the resolution to receive, or recommendation to receive.
Thank you. A seconder for that motion. Councillor Crockett. All in favor? All right, thank you. That carries. Item number 11.4, new policies, access to records and protection of personal privacy, privacy breach and routine disclosure, active dissemination, and again, the clerk. Thank you.
So these policies, and the report was actually written by the deputy clerk, but she's had to leave. So I'm presenting on her behalf. We together, along with CIO Barrick, developed these policies. They are 3 brand new policies, which is why we're bringing them to your attention. As you know, I, as the clerk, is designated head under MFIPA and under the current delegation bylaw. And that also provides the CAO with the authority to develop, modify, approve, and implement administrative policies. We currently don't have any formal policies or procedures in place with respect to these 3 these 3 types of information. The first one is the access to records and protection of personal privacy. This is an internal policy that will provide to the public information on how we handle freedom of information requests, and also gives guidelines for staff who don't necessarily do them very often. The second policy is a privacy breach policy. It outlines the steps followed when there is a privacy breach within the municipality, who's in control, how we report that information, things like that. Again, it is another way to show the public how we are protecting privacy and what happens if there is a breach of privacy. And the third one is routine disclosure and active dissemination. This one was a big one that Sarah had been working on for a long period of time. It identifies which records can be disclosed outside of an FOI request or Freedom of Information request, and which ones we regularly post, such as bylaws, things like that. And it is, so basically routine disclosure is the release of certain types of records in response to a request, such as printing off a bylaw for a resident or emailing out a building permit for a homeowner. Active is when, like a regular bylaw that is of public interest, we post on our website, council minutes, council agendas. So the schedule under the policy states which records can be released and which ones can only be done under specific circumstances. So it also provides more clarity and information to residents as well as staff. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Jana. So any questions or comments from council? Okay, all right.
I'll move the recommendation to receive for information.
Okay, a seconder, please. Danielle, moved by Deputy Mayor Smyber and seconded by Councillor Lockie. All in favor? Thank you. Item number 12, reports of committees. Items listed under reports of committees are approved by council in one motion. Council members may request that one or more items be separated for further action. So unless anybody wants to do that, a mover and a seconder that reports of committee agenda items 12.1 and 12.2 be approved as presented. Question?
I think we've had some discussions about these committee motions and just unpacking them so we know the implications. And I think you had mentioned like the chair should unpack them. So I'm ready to do that if you'd like.
Go ahead.
So yeah, we had a busy meeting in December. The first one is respect to a presentation by Andrew Gunn, a consultant who works specifically on public art installations. To make a long presentation short, He's responsible for a lot of the mural activity in St. Thomas specifically, as well as a lot of work with downtown London. And he works it's kind of an agent to connect artists with property owners, both private and public, and donors to facilitate the installation of murals primarily. And this is something that we have some members on our committee who are very interested in. And the consequence of this would be a discussion between Andrew and our CAO about what would be a productive engagement. So I think there would still be another report that would come forward to the committee and then to council about potential budget implications if there is an engagement. So the second one is to do with BIA Ontario, and it's a Business Improvement Association area associations. And basically it is a association that works like a committee of council, but it does so on the basis of a levy collected by the municipality within the designated area. So you'd have to define an area of activity similar to the CIP, and then the committee would have to be comprised of those whom the levy is collected from, and they would act in order to improve the business environment, more so through infrastructure and activities versus straight business promotion, if I'm getting that correctly. So this motion is to investigate it. It's not to engage in that. It's to solicit some feedback on that. And the last one, is to engage with Middlesex County and look at potential signage for the business parks, so that Donnybrook, the Da Vinci, and the Thorndale industrial area, and getting some signage to recognize that we do have lots that are available and for development in those areas. And that, again, is just an investigation and a report back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heyman. Any questions, comments regarding this? Nothing. Michelle?
Just had one, I think I know the answer. With respect to the first recommendation about engaging a consultant, I'm assuming that doesn't offend, I guess, the procurement policies. 'Cause sometimes consultants have some special wording in them that you can maybe a single source as opposed to going out for other. I don't even know if there is anyone else that in the area that can do that, but just a question. And I'm sure staff will take a look at that before bringing a report back.
Thank you. So my understanding of that is we would have a conversation with the individual for potential facilitator partnership. So we would bring anything back to council for approval. Yeah.
Oh, okay, given that, is a mover and a seconder? Do we see that? Okay, Councillor Crockett and Councillor Heeman, all in favor? Okay, that passes, thank you. Item number 13 is the mayor's report, and unfortunately, because we've come through the Christmas break and we pretty much wrapped up things in about mid-December, and we're now only 13 days into January. I have no report for you tonight, so more next month. I don't believe there's any unfinished businesses or notice of motion or new business. Am I correct in that? Okay. So, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to adopt, the bylaws, 17.1. I'm sorry, bylaw 1-2025 through 6-2025 be adopted as presented. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Smybert and seconded by Councillor Lockie. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, we will move on now to the confirmatory bylaw. That bylaw 7-2025 being the confirmatory bylaw be adopted as presented. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Lucky, all in favor? Thank you. Next meetings, Monday, January the 27th, 2025 at 5 p.m. here in the chambers, followed by Monday, February the 10th, 2025 at 5 p.m. And the next thing is, we're looking for a motion to adjourn. And the time is 8:38. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Lockie, all in favor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.